ask all of you, how many of you take public transport? Almost everybody. How many of you feel that it's very crowded? Almost everybody. Is this the future? So how many of you have seen this picture online? It had been making the rounds post the population debate. I thought it was hilarious. But jokes aside, we should think about whether this is the future. If today we feel crowded, what would 2030 feel like with 6.9 million people? But I'm going to actually venture and give you a different perspective now. I mean, like all of you, I also felt that 6.9 was a difficult number to understand, especially if today, I hardly go to Orchard Road. I try and not go wherever the crowds are because I'm terrified of crowds. And in 2030, if our population is going to go to another million, it's 5.3 million today, and if it goes to 6.9 million, how much more crowded will we feel? But I want to just pause and also tell you about this land use paper that came with the white paper. I didn't actually put the cover in the slides, but together with the white paper, the government had actually launched a land use paper. And in this land use paper, they charted how Singapore was going to get to 6.9 million, but still actually maintain the quality of life and the sense of space for everybody. And I'd like to bring your attention to the 6.5 million figure, which Ms. Ryder had mentioned earlier in her presentation. In the last URA master plan, they had actually already said that they were planning for a population. They weren't planning, but they were preparing Singapore for a possible population of 6.5. So actually at 6.9 isn't too different. But we have to understand why people were surprised when the 6.9 million was being published. And I think, there was a lot of discussion that in the last few years, the government has, taken its foot off the pedal, and it's actually not built enough, whether it's HDB flats, whether it's MRTs and buses. And this land use paper actually put in place a plan for Singapore to overbuild instead of underbuild, and that has been something that is really important. The congestion that we see today is a result of underbuilding in the last few years. So we need to actually make a plan, because if we don't plan, you get what we see today, you get what the overcrowding that you feel today is all due to a lack of planning. So what are some of the solutions? There are some towns like Tengah and Bidadari that will be developed in the next few years by MND, the Ministry of National Development. And there are also going to be islands that will be developed in the future. Tekong, some of you will be going to NS very soon. You will be very well acquainted with the island of Tekong. They are trying to consolidate that, and in the future maybe possibly build more homes on that. Pulau Ubin, everyone is very familiar with. That's also a possible island that we can build homes if it comes to that and we actually need space for our children. I know many of you probably won't think about that right now, but it is something that our leaders have to think about, how we're going to prepare for the population of the future. Building upwards and downwards, the pinnacle at Duxton in Tanjong Pagar. How many of you have actually seen it? Been to it? It's quite an iconic project in Tanjong Pagar, and it's very outstanding, and it's actually 70 stories tall. I think 50 or 70, something like that. And one of the solutions is actually building higher and higher or going underground. JTC and LTA are exploring underground shopping malls. To some extent, we already have that CityLink. I'm sure all of you know that. It's already underground. So technology innovations are going to enable us to prepare for a bigger population, and it's important. I'm not saying that we will get to 6.9, but if we have to prepare, what are the things that we have to do? Because infrastructure cannot be built overnight. It has to be taken over a large number of years. So I did this story on the rocky road to future growth. It's basically summarizing the population debate, asking questions about where is Singapore headed and how we can find consensus to move forward. What ideal population size all of us want to, and all of you are going to be the next generation of voters. So these issues are very important to you. You have to decide how comfortable you want to be in Singapore, and what kind of policies you want in place, whether you want slower growth, you want less foreigners, all these are questions that you need to think about. The guy over there on the left, Mr. Liu Taiker, he's a veteran architect, very well known. He was the former HDB CEO and former URA chief planner. And when I spoke to him over the phone, he actually said to me, I don't understand what all this fuss is about. Yes, we grew very quickly over the last few years, and there's a case for growing a little bit slower, making sure that the foreigners that come into Singapore are well integrated. But he actually said to me, in the year 2100, where is Singapore going to be? Surely it's not going to stay still, and if it needs to thrive, we might be looking at 8 million, 10 million. So are we being really short-sighted in saying that, no, not 6.9, not 2030, we can't even think of 2030. How can we think of 2100? I'm not going to be here, you guys might be, your children definitely will be. So what kind of an island would they be living on? Somewhere where it's very cleverly planned, somewhere where the sense of space and the quality of life is maintained. So it all comes down to this. I did this story, Space for More, and I interviewed 5 different people, an author, an economist, a nominated member of parliament, a former Nature Society president, and an architect. And I asked them about their sense of space and their quality of life over the years. How did they feel that Singapore has evolved? That in Singapore in 1965, there was 1.9 million people. Today, there's 5.3 million people. And in that space of time, almost 5 decades, all 5 people that I interviewed actually said life has improved for them. So, my point is, life can improve even if there's more people, but what's important is actually planning for it, making sure that the landscape in Singapore is being developed optimally, that we're going to have an iconic skyline, we're going to have a sense of heritage. What needs to be preserved is preserved, what needs to be developed is developed, but all that needs debate, and all of you need to be involved in this conversation about what you want Singapore to look like in the future. And all that comes down to planning. So with that, I end my presentation. I hope you ask us some interesting questions. Thank you very much.